In this video, we're going to discuss how IP and Ethernet interact. Now, you'll recall that IP is a layer 3 protocol and uses logical addresses, those four dotted quads that you're so familiar with, 192.168.1.100, for example. However, at least on an Ethernet network, Ethernet controls layer 2 and uses those burned-in hardware addresses that you've seen if you've dug through Wireshark in any way. It's that big, long hex address that we'll see here in our Wireshark capture in just a moment. So you've got these layer 3 logical addresses and you've got these layer 2 burned-in addresses. How do you reconcile the two? Well, the reconciliation method is called the Address Resolution Protocol, or ARP. And every network device that has layer 2 and layer 3 in it maintains an ARP table that maps those layer 2 Ethernet addresses to layer 3 IP addresses. The IP stack on the device uses this table to generate the destination address in the Ethernet frame. Now, obviously, that works well if the network device already knows about the network address, but if the MAC address isn't known, then a broadcast is sent looking for the destination Ethernet address. If there is indeed a device on the network configured with that IP address, the correct device replies to the broadcast, and the correct address is populated in the ARP table. Now, this ARP table is not static. You can set static ARP entries. Most people don't on their workstations or really anywhere on the network, except in a very few edge cases. So the ARP entries in the workstation time out after a few seconds. Now, this happens for a couple of reasons. Number one, if it had to maintain an ARP table of every MAC to IP mapping that it ever knew about, then this ARP table would grow to be huge. But the main reason that this happens is so if you have to apply this IP address to a different workstation, let's say your main file server goes down and you have a standby file server and you power it up and connect it to your SAN and it's back up and running, it's got the same IP address. But for all those workstations that still have the old MAC address mapping in there in the ARP table, they won't know how to get to your new server's MAC address until the ARP entry times out. The workstation then sends a broadcast and say, hey, does anyone have this IP address? And the new server responds back with its new MAC address saying, here's my MAC address. You can start sending all those packets to me. And again, to pull back the curtain a little bit, because I kind of like to do that to kind of give you a teaser of what's in store if you go through the CCNA and the CCNP. If you go down the path of the CCNP and you talk about some of the redundancy protocols, HSRP and VRRP and so on and so forth, you'll see that those protocols provide redundant services at the network level by basically spoofing a MAC address. And again, that's way outside the realm of the CCENT. So that's something you can research on your own time if you'd like. So let's look at my workstation here. So I've got a DOS prompt pulled up here. I'll pull it up here in the middle so everyone can see. And I'm going to show you what the ARP table on my workstation looks like. So on a Windows box, you do ARP-A, and that gives you the ARP table on this particular workstation. Now you can see here's my internet address, 192.168.1.0.1. And here's the physical address that corresponds with that IP address. Here's the broadcast address. You notice that the broadcast address is all Fs because it is a broadcast. It's all ones. Just like the super broadcast is what I call it, the all 255's address is all Fs as well. You'll notice that these are static ARP entries, but they're put there by the system. You normally won't have to enter the ARP commands to set up a static ARP yourself. And just to further drive the point home, we'll pull up Wireshark here, and I've got a packet highlighted that is an ARP packet. This was my workstation, 192.168.1.104, and what I did is I manually cleared the ARP table. If you want to play along at home, you can do this by doing ARP-D for delete and hit star. That kills the entire ARP table. If you look at the ARP table now, you'll notice that there's only one MAC address in there. It happens to be my default gateway out of the network. And if you hit up arrow and run the ARP command again, you'll notice that all of those dynamic and static ARPs come back into the ARP table because it's having to communicate with all of those servers and workstations. So at a packet level, this is what it looks like. Here's my workstation sending out a broadcast saying who has 192.168.1.240 tell 192.168.1.104. This is an ARP request. It's coming from my Ethernet address to the broadcast, the all ones. And you can dig down in here and look at all of the bits and bytes inside the packet. Generally, all you need to know about this HARP request is right here. And the next packet that you see there is the reply coming from this tie-in comp, which happens to be the server sitting over in my lab, saying 192.168.1.240 is at this MAC address. You'll notice that in the ARP resolution protocol, it's a reply, and it says, here's my sending MAC address and my IP, and here's my target MAC and IP address. So again, ARP is a very, very simple protocol. It's kind of the glue that holds all of IP together, to be honest. And that concludes our discussion of how IP and Ethernet interact.